Hello everyone, welcome to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Israel. This is Parashat Ha'azinu. Listen up, quite literally, Deuteronomy 32. And this one is called This Old Man. So, how was everybody's Rosh Hashanah? Did you get it? Did you get that moment? I got a moment. I'd love to share that moment with you. Kind of helps me for where we're at right now. So, as you may have heard, they placed Israel under a 3-week lockdown from Rosh Hashanah until after Sukkot. Those 3 weeks, they keep coming back for me, I'm telling you. No synagogues, no walking more than 500 meters away from your home. If you're going to be with a group of people, it can't be more than 20 people outside in a radius of 4 meters around each person, not to mention masks on faces at all time, everywhere, wherever. Unless you're, of course, sitting down, eating, because then, whatever, stupidity. Anyway, if you're alone at the beach, by yourself, no one around you, no mask, that's a 500 shekel fine. So that's what's happening here. Except, of course, if you are, protesting and like a wilde chaya, and then with thousands of people all around you, bunched together, no masks, right in front of the police face, then it's okay. No one seems to care. You see, stupidity. But anyway, since we can't be in a synagogue, we built a nice tent. And we had our prayers there. Everything was legit and it was all split up within the regulations they set for us. We don't want no trouble, right? We only want to pray. So there was a part after the Shemona Yisrael on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, which was on Shabbat, before Chazarat HaShatz. Chazarat HaShatz is when the Shaliach Tzibur, the cantor, recants the Shemona Yisrael, and we all answer Amen in their prayers within. So before we even got to this, there were certain piyutim, hymns, and it was recited by several of the men. So there was, let's say, 10 of them, so 10 guys would say it, 10 different people. It would kind of bounce from one person to the next. And this one was called, My Lord, I have heard of you. So I'm going to have to translate this for you because it doesn't, I haven't seen this one before because I started with a new minion. Anyway, I'll tell you about it. I'll translate just a few lines so you get into it. My Lord, I have heard of you and how you are, and I feared. My Lord, I heard and I trembled on the day that you judged me. I groveled and was frightened on the day of judgment. I was lowly and afraid because the day of judgment is great. It obviously sounds much better in Hebrew. Each one of these is a different paragraph. It's a different person saying them. My Lord, who will not fear from a great and terrible day of judgment? For yours is the greatness and the magnitude and the glory. In the place where fiery sparks fly, who can possibly stand before you and hear your secrets? So like I said, each verse is read by a different individual, sort of sporadically, handed from one to the other. It involves everyone, so you don't know where it's coming from, right? So somewhere about 20 feet in front of me, slightly to my left, so it was like it would be right over there was a really old man, and he was in a wheelchair. Now, he wasn't wheeling himself around either, okay? He was old and he was frail. And then the verse got to him. Now, you have to understand, these people, when I say these people, the minion that I had the privilege and honor of joining recently, they don't just read the verse. They don't even sing it. They wail it. I'm in a Sephardi minion, okay? For the first time, I'm Ashkenaz, Nusach Sfard, davening Sephardi minion now. Let me tell you, I'm never leaving. You want soul? They got soul, okay? We could all learn a thing or two. Anyway, When it gets to our man in the wheelchair, here's the verse in Hebrew. I'm going to say this verse in Hebrew. Adonai melech yoshev al kiseh din, sevivav serafim omdim al midin, ki chen davar hamelech lifnei kol yodei dat vadin, leagid ki yashar Adonai. I'll translate, but as this old man in the wheelchair is screaming and wailing these words at the top of his lungs, it's not only a physical thing, but his soul is weeping and yearning. He was saying, my Lord Adonai, the King sits on the throne of judgment. Around him stand seraphim, fire angels, to give testimony of favor or debt. Because the word of the King is before all those who know the law and judgment, to say righteous is the Lord. La'agid ki yashar Adonai. Now, I'm trying to paint a picture for you. As if these words were not powerful enough. As if this man wailing his heart out wasn't emotional enough. He then proceeds to stand. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. His body is shaking, he's putting his hands down, and he's lifting himself up. On his own, I might add, because no one was around him at that moment, because it would never occur to you that this guy's going anywhere except where he is being placed by whoever's wheeling him around at the time. But the harder he screamed, his voice ascended and he gained strength. And it was this old man and his heart for God who just humbled the entire congregation. That's my moment. That's my inspiration, at least for this right now. God bless him. When we are young, we tend to be foolish. The older we get, the wiser we get. Well, some of us anyway. When Kings David and Solomon said that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, they didn't mean fear necessarily as in I am afraid. Obviously there is that kind of fear, but rather reverence, yirat Hashem. To understand who you stand before. And when you do, it makes you this big, if at all. In other words, through the talents that they were given, David's heart for God, David's a man after my own heart, and Solomon's wisdom, God gave him more wisdom than any other man alive. They were able to comprehend in their own way what God is on a much higher, deeper, wider, and generally speaking, grander level than anyone else in existence. After the temple was destroyed, the gates of illumination were closed until they opened once again for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's a conduit. After his passing, only windows have been opened to the interpretations and illuminations of his already illuminating words. And as we've mentioned so many times before, the more you know God, the more humble you become. And no man was more humble than Moses. So you know, if he's the most humble man, you know that no one knew God more than him. Which means by default, no man has known God on such a level of face-to-face, mouth-to-mouth as spoken by God himself in the 5 books of Moses. So this is undeniable and is not debatable. And so when Moses calls the witnesses forth, it's important to remember that it's not only for bad, but for good as well. See, when we think of witnesses bringing forth a witness, these are witnesses. They're impartial. They speak the truth. Why? Because he's calling about on the heavens and the earth. Truthful witnesses speak the truth, and so the balance really lies within our hands. What are we going to do? Their testimony is going to be truthful. This is especially relevant to the times that we are currently in. Not only in the world, okay, that the world is currently being judged globally, but also historically speaking. This coming Shabbat, the one that's between Rosh Hashanah, the great day of judgment, and Yom Kippur, the day of atonement, which is the only day of the year that is considered Kodesh Kodashim, Holy of Holies. This Shabbat is called Shabbat Shuvah, the Shabbat, the Sabbath of return, to Lashuv. And where are we returning to? If you say you got to return, that means you were someplace before to go back to, right? From whence we came, of course. This is the Shabbat that every Jew not only receives an extra portion of the Spirit for Shabbat itself, this we receive every Shabbat, but also because the gates of mercy are currently open to us in the 10 days of repentance. Now you may ask, what's the point? Or why are these 10 days, including Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, different from any other day of the year? Can we not also do tshuva at every moment throughout the year? Yes, of course we can. However, there are certain sins which can only be absolved and forgiven during these times, not to mention you're setting up how your year is going to look like. So the thing is, we don't know what exactly the account is. We don't know which sins did what. So we need this time. And yet, that's still not the point of what's the point. In last week's Parsha, chapter 31, verse 29, Moses says the following: "For I know that after my death, you will surely become corrupted and deviate from the way which I had commanded you. Consequently, the evil will befall you at the end of days," listen, "because you did evil in the eyes of the Lord to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands." You might read this and say, well, clearly Moses saw what was going to happen, and we've learned he did. He saw that we would become corrupted, as he said, and that we wouldn't be following the word of God anyway. So what's the point of following the commandments of the Torah only for us to ultimately and inevitably fall? Why do we do this? If we're going to sin, so why do we do it? Why do we do it? Firstly, who is he speaking to? The next generation of the wilderness. Not the one who died, not the one who left Egypt, but the children of those who died. This is the generation that's about to enter the land. And of course, we know the stories, we know the prophecies, we know the history. So then, if this is what we were told, then what's the point of anything? A second, we have to remember that Moses is giving his account of what he himself had seen in the wilderness, and because of who he hadn't entered the land. Listen to his words. "You will become corrupted and deviate from the way which I had commanded you. Consequently, the evil will befall you." When? At the end of days. Now, this is a huge reveal, and we must understand why. This brings us some hope. You see, during the 40 years in the wilderness, the presence of God was so prevalent, so predominant, that it was undeniable, okay? You could see it in the physical reality as all of nature bent to the convenience and protection of Israel. Through the clouds of glory by day, the pillar of fire by night, the fact that within the camp there was no sand nor dust, and they were in the desert, okay? The manna came down from heaven, water came from a rock, and there was no shortage of anything. As it's written, their clothes did not wither and their feet did not swell up. They wore the same garments for 40 years. It just kind of grew with them, and they didn't wither. Nothing fell apart. They were in a form of a protective Garden of Eden, if you will. But it was precisely because God was so close to them at all times that the moment they sinned, there was judgment immediately. How long did it take for Adam and Eve to be expelled from the garden after they sinned? We know what happened within the same hour. Man was created on Erev Shabbat. They did not spend the Shabbat in the Garden of Eden. The only time the children of Israel could do tsuva is during a plague while they were dying in the thousands, or when they were being attacked by snakes and scorpions, and then they came to God and Moses and repented, but still they were being taken out. The closer God is to us, the less tolerant he will be of sin, which should show us where we are and where God is in the world today. If the children of Israel lived in the wilderness the way we do today, there will be no more children of Israel. For I know your rebellious spirit and your stubbornness. Even while I am alive with you today, you are rebelling against the Lord, and surely after my death, said Moses, who quite literally saw the end of days in order to say this. He was speaking what he was seeing, and what he was doing was actually giving us hope. Hope in the possibility of tsuva, because the end of days has a double meaning. Our own individual end of days are when we die. The end of my days is when I die, is when I'm in the ground. That's the end of my days. Meaning that we're going to live our lives the way that we want, but during our lives, though we might become corrupt, so long as there is breath in our body, we can always correct. In which case, either way, our final judgment will come at the end of our days here on earth. And the other end of days are the end of days of the world as we know it, which by all accounts we are most certainly in them currently. And what happens in the end of days? Judgment. Everybody knows this. And why judgment? For I know that after my death you will surely become corrupted and deviate from the way which I had commanded you. Consequently, the evil will befall you at the end of days, because you did evil in the eyes of the Lord, to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands. This actually is more towards the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, and the nations rather than Israel. And the reason is this. The judgment that God brings upon our heads is as follows. This is likened to a king who makes a ruling that whoever will commit such and such crime, this gigantic boulder will be dropped on their head. Lo and behold, the king's rule had been broken, and the transgressor was none other than the king's very own son. So what does the king do? The king, who is perfectly just and yet completely merciful, what does he do? He could not break his word, since all his other ministers over there, they were foaming at the mouth to receive the rewards of the king's son. And what kind of standard would he be setting anyway if he broke his word? So what the king did was shatter that gigantic boulder into thousands of pieces, placed the remains in a huge barrel, and would continuously pour the debris upon the head of his son until the contents of the barrel were empty and the debt was paid, thereby remaining true to his word that the boulder would in fact be thrown upon the head of the transgressor while showing mercy towards his son. This is Israel. We have not known a moment of peace since the Second Temple period. Now, we're still here, but the debris just keeps on coming. We're covered in dust. Sometimes the pebbles, come out, slightly larger pebbles, could be likened to rockets from Gaza, maybe even suicide bombings or, random stabbings in the street that we have every now and again. And sometimes a very large stone that was not completely crushed might fall out the barrel. It wasn't ground up. Fall out the barrel would severely bruise, cause bleeding and trauma, possibly even deform, which would be likened to the Inquisition, the pogroms, the Holocaust. But always, the dust and sand upon our heads, always, constantly, a constant reminder of our shame. That is anti-Semitism. That is the essence of Amalek. It's the hatred simply because we are Jews, and it's always there, it always exists, whether we know about it or not, whether we are aware of it or not. Now, this is what's coming because this is what's coming. But we're getting close to the bottom of the barrel, you see? And so whatever is coming out now are the final pieces. The concept of tsuva, in this metaphor is perhaps a hard hat, protective gear, a helmet, some armor, a shield, an iron dome. What's coming is coming, but what's left will hit us in the end, and so long as we're here, we can sweeten the judgment. And Moses knew this. And like we just said, witnesses are not only called up to give a negative account, but a positive one as well. They're called to give an account, which includes all the suffering that we have gone through for the sake of the world. Just like Moses did not enter the land because he converted the Erev Rav. He believed that they would leave their idolatry in Egypt. This is why God says, what do you want with these people? And Moses said, no, come on. They're your people. You'll see. When they see your miracles and everything that you do, they'll come around. They never fully came around. And again, they were responsible for the golden calf. So, and yet if the sin of the golden calf would not have taken place, the rest of the world would have been destroyed and only Israel would exist. And this was the plan all along. So when Israel sin, and yes, we do this on our own accord, but that's only because when we were ready to unite heaven and earth, we were tripped up by the mixed multitude. We were going back to the days of Genesis. And it was a slippery slope from that point. Moses knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was imparting to us, as only we would be able to make sense of it. Then Moses spoke into the ears of the entire assembly of Israel the words of the following song until their completion. Why into the ears? Because this one, well, the true meaning and understanding was for our ears alone. We're about to not only scratch the surface, that's the best we could do, we're going to scratch the surface of the greatest song to have ever been sung. Oh yes. Now you might be saying, well, what about the song of songs? Is it not the song of all songs? Great question. I'm about to give you an answer. How's that Hebrew coming along? The answer is, of course, that in Hebrew, they're both spelled differently and pronounced differently. Shir Hashirim. Shir, it's more like a poem. Whereas this one is called Shira. Shir and Shira. They're the same word, only with the hey at the end. Song, poem, poem, song. In the end, there's the letter hey. Shir is masculine, comes from the yud, right? And Shira is feminine because of the hey. Top to bottom, bottom to top. The masculine meaning Zeir Anpin, right? And the feminine meaning Malchut. Where is it? Here we go. Here we go, here we go. Zeir Anpin and Malchut. Okay. We'll be looking at this one a little bit more. Wherever we see, the Zohar brings a fascinating explanation to this. So I'm going to explain it. I'll explain it to you. Okay. Whenever we see a song being sung, its focus can vary. Okay, we're talking about a shir, not a shira. For instance, when Moses wrote Psalms 92, Moses wrote this, which starts, Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat, a song with musical accompaniments for the Sabbath day. Now, who is this written for? For the Sabbath day, it's very clear. But also, on a higher level, it's written for Malchut, right? To accept the Shabbat. Now, how do we know that Moses wrote it? Because the first letters of the four opening words, Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat, make up the word Le Moshe, of Moses. Mem, Mizmor, Shir, Shin, Lamed, Leyom HaShabbat. So you have Le Moshe, of Moses. And of course, to top it all off, we have learned this in the past, but in case you missed it, not only did he write this for Shabbat, but he also wrote this for the redemption of Korach. Because in verse 13, and we read this every Shabbat, he says, Tzadik katamar ifrach ka'erez balvanon isge. The righteous one flourishes like a palm, as a cedar in Lebanon he grows. The last letters of those three words, tzaddik, katamar, ifrach, spell out Korach, tzaddik, kuf, katamar, reish, ifrach, chet, Korach. Remember his scuffle with Korach? Meaning Korach will be redeemed and be called amongst the righteous, who will flourish like the palm tree does, growing up straight, and dwell in the Garden of Eden as a cedar in Lebanon he grows. But I digress. This psalm is just, the Psalms are just infinite pools of wisdom if you know how to read them. So what about the Song of Songs? Okay? The Song of Songs. Shir HaShirim Asher LiShlomo. Shir. So it's a shir, it's not a shira. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Now, it actually doesn't say which is Solomon's, but rather Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, which is of the king who beholds peace. LaMelech Shehashalom Lo. Also known as Shlomo, but rather, who is the king who beholds peace? Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's God, okay? And we can see, so who's this song for, essentially? It's for God. And so Solomon was imparting the song of this relationship, which is a loving song between God and his people Israel. It descends from the highest of heavens, from beneath the throne of God all the way down to Malchut. So as far as we're concerned in this table, this is Malchut, this is Keter, crown. Just so you understand, we're going to talk a little bit deeper about this. This is not where God is, okay? This is the higher of the lowest of all levels. This is the lowest of all the lowest levels, and this is where we are. So don't be discouraged, we'll get to that too. Anyway, Rabbi Akiva called Shir HaShirim Kodesh Kodashim because it encompasses all the Torah and all its secrets therein, which to sum up in one sentence is God's relationship with Israel. That's what the whole Torah is about. It's God's love with Israel. Like we said, the 5 books of Moses, the first word is Bereshit, the last word is Israel. Bereshit Israel. At first there was Israel. That's it. God gave everything for Israel. That's why everything was created. Nevertheless, this is a shir and not a shira. And yet still a shira is considered higher than a shir. Why is that? Remember, everything matters when it comes to the study of Torah. Not only what is said, but how it is said. Who said it? Who did they say it to? What is the context? Where was it said? In what state was it being said? What time of day was it being said? Who is it meant for? And so on and so forth. All these things are relevant. So to answer this question on how come a shira is considered higher than a shir, it's very simple. Direction. As in, where did it come from? If it came from the heavens, which it did, and was obviously given to the chosen individuals here on earth because it came from above, then by default it had to descend, come from on high, low, thereby decreasing its holiness in order to be able to exist in this world. Do you see? There's nothing wrong with the song, but if it comes from up there, it cannot exist in this world. Therefore, it has to lessen or rather mask itself. But the shira that Moses wrote, it originated where? Right here in Malchut, and worked its way higher and higher and higher and higher, thereby increasing in the holiness until it reached the throne of glory. Much like in Exodus 15:1, Az yashir Moshe et ha-shira. Then Moses and the children of Israel, it says, Yashir will sing et what? Hashira. From bottom up. It's very clear, a song to the Lord. Where does it say? It says right here, to the Lord, and they spoke, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for very exalted is he, a horse and his rider cast into the sea. Okay? Now, the word, like I said, Az Yashir, then he will sing. So, this is also prophecy. In other words, it's going to be sung. So, how is the song of Ha'azinu right now? Listen up. Any different? Who's the composer? Moses. What did he do? He was the only man to ascend to the heavens and come back with the Torah. No one else did this. Now, we also know that Moses was equal to the 600,000 souls of Israel who came out of Egypt and received the Torah at the time. Now, we're speaking of all the males between ages 20 and 50, okay? So, again, we'll get to that too. Moses imparted a code in this song that would elevate Israel, push them higher through Torah to right beneath the throne of glory, ascending and gaining momentum every single level, every single step, every single note sung, more power to rise. This song of Ha'azinu was written for none other than the children of Israel, for it shows us, directs us, and instructs us on just how we ascend to our Father in heaven. The only other man to have the ability to do anything like this was King David, as he was called the Lord's anointed. And just like Moses, he gave his life to connecting Malchut and Zeir Anpin, right? Again, we're going to go with this one again. Malchut, this is where we are at. This is Zeir Anpin, these 6 right here. This is the Torah as far as we are concerned. What did David do? He tried to align this. Moses tried to align this so this could come down, while David was trying to establish this and build this up, the connection between Malchut and Yesod. This is what it's all about. This is what we're still trying to do till this very day. We could also see this in 2 Samuel 22. Vaydaber David la'Adonai et divrei hashira hazot beyom hetzil Adonai oto mikaf kol oivav umikaf Shaul. And David spoke to the Lord the words of this song in Hebrew, Shira, on the day that the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. Vayomer Adonai sil'i u'mitzudati u'miflati li. And he said, the Lord is my rock and my fortress and a rescuer to me. Elohei tzuri echese bo. Magini v'keren ish'i misgavi u'menosi mish'i mechamas. Toshieni, Hamas. Yeah, you know that terror group? You know what the word actually means? Destruction. Or terror. Yep. Anyway, God is my rock under whom I take cover, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my support and my refuge. He is my Savior who saves me from violence. Who's the rock? God's the rock. So, just like Moses, thank you, David, just if there was ever any doubt, just like Moses set up the tribes and the laws and the responsibilities, David united the kingdoms as he was the first true king of Israel. He was God's pick. Saul was the people's pick. They said, give us a king like the rest of the nations. God said, are you sure? All right, go get that guy, like the rest of the nations. Who was God's pick? That guy, man after my own heart. So, see what I'm saying? It's one thing to bring the holiness down upon the mundane, but it's another thing entirely to elevate the mundane into the holiness, thereby doing a true tikkun, a rectification. And this is something that we've all been given the ability to do. This is the amazing part. However, very few know how to do it, as many of these secrets have been lost, or people are just not even aware of what it is that they're doing. But they are here, right here, within the song. The understanding, the warning, the secrets, from the beginning all the way through until the very end of days. Then Moses spoke into the ears of the entire assembly of Israel the words of the following song until their completion. Are you listening? Listen, O heavens, and I will speak, and let the earth hear the words of my mouth. You better believe that they stood at full attention to the words of Moses. When one calls upon witnesses to testify, it's then their own existence that is in the balance. Obviously, before God, you cannot give a false testimony. Why the heavens and the earth? Because the heavens see all. Sure. But how about the spiritual ramifications that are done here on earth, that take place up there? And the earth experiences all things. Sure. But how about the physical obstacles that have been thrown at Israel since becoming a nation? Remember, all the other angels, the guardian angels of all the other nations, were coming at God. They wanted. God said, no, 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 no. God is our keeper. Every nation has their own angel, and there's 70 of them. No other prophet has ever possessed the ability nor given the authority to invoke that which was first spoken of. I'm talking about, at first God created the heavens and the earth. Those heavens and the earth. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. Listen, O heavens, and I will speak, and let the earth hear the words of my mouth. These are the supernal heavens and supernal earth. We discussed this before, that Moses invoked, not the sky and the ground like you're thinking today. This is the very beginning of all creation. All creation is within this capsule. This is who Moses invoked. But as far as we're concerned, we're going to keep it simple, okay? Heaven and earth, fine. Now, when was the first time these witnesses have been summoned to testify since this time? Isaiah chapter 1. The vision of Isaiah the son of Amoz, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Yotam, Achaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord has spoken. Children I have raised and exalted, yet they have rebelled against me. An ox knows his owner, a donkey his master's crib. Israel does not know, my people does not consider. Woe to a sinful nation, a people heavy with iniquity, evil-doing seed, corrupt children. They forsook the Lord, they provoked the Holy One of Israel, they drew backwards. Okay, ouch. So, what Moses said would, of course, come to pass. They have become corrupt. But again, that's why the song was given. Here we see the difference when Moses says, listen, O heavens, and I will speak, and let the earth hear the words of my mouth. And Isaiah says, hear, O heavens. Moses says, listen, O heavens, hear, O heavens. Listen, earth, hear the words of my mouth. Earth, listen, give ear. Ha'azini, right? It's better in Hebrew. Ha'azinu hashamayim v'adabera v'tishma ha'aretz imrei pi. Then Isaiah says, shim'u shamayim v'azini ha'aretz. So he reverses ha'azinu and shim'u. So what's the difference between listening and hearing? Listening is tishma, but it's listening, tishma, it's but listening to what is being said. Okay, yeah, got it. You said something, I heard it. While hearing, ha'azinu hashamayim, which is our parsha, is receiving upon yourself the words that are being spoken. So, are you listening or do you hear me? It's a difference. And so why did Moses give the deeper meaning to the heavens? Because here on earth, many people can do many mitzvot, meaning they listen to the words of God. Do this. Okay, I'm doing it. Do that. I'm doing it. No problem. But if they truly do not receive upon themselves the commandments of God, and they just go through the empty motions for whatever reason, it actually is considered a great sin. Okay? That's what I'm saying. You have to be so careful. We have to study these things. Okay, as Jews, as Israel, we take upon ourselves the Torah. And so it's one thing to do it, but it's another thing to understand how it's being done. If it is not done correctly, it's not a good thing. Okay. So Moses invokes both the spiritual and the physical to stand as a witness for Israel. And while I was writing this, I couldn't help but think of our prayer, the prayer which establishes who we are as a people, the prayer that every Jew says before they close their eyes at night, and then again in the morning, the prayer that every Jew knows to say also before they die, should they get the chance. And that, of course, is Shema Yisrael. While it's translated in English as Hear, O Israel, it should actually be Listen, O Israel. And we said, listen is, okay, you said it, cool, but not taking it upon oneself. Right? But that's also why we don't say it in English. Nevertheless, if this is the case, should it not have been said, Ha'azinu Yisrael or Ha'azina Yisrael and not Shema Yisrael? Given that Ha'azinu is the acceptance of the oneness of God? The answer, because Shema Yisrael, Hashem Eloheinu Hashem Echad, right? One. The answer, I believe, is very apparent when we read the Shema prayer itself. That's opening thing. It's the opening statement. Listen up. Yeah, okay. All right. Now what? It's all about free will, and that each man of Israel has been given a choice. We studied this again a few weeks ago. How can one simply accept to love God? Okay, I love you, God. No, you don't. It's impossible. You cannot accept that upon you. Right? How can one simply accept to love God when we know that love is something that takes time to develop? This is the difference. Therefore, it would be unrealistic for God to request this of Israel, and our God is perfectly just, which is why we are required to hear the terms and then choose our course of action, or to listen to I'm already confused with this, to listen to the terms, yes, and then we choose our course of action. And every time that we make the right choice, that listening becomes hearing and it becomes etched on our hearts. Meaning, choose life or death. And both, as we discussed, come from the same source. Which leads us to the second verse. Ya'arof kamatar likhi, tizal katal imrati. My lesson will drip like rain, my word will flow like dew. Our sages say in Masechet Yoma, page 72b, in regards to one who studies Torah. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, what is the meaning of that which is written, and this is the Torah which Moses put, some, before the children of Israel? Zot Torah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Israel. Okay? This is also a verse that we say, we lift up the Torah, you do Hagbah, you look at it, take your pinky, Zot Torah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Israel. Al pi Adonai be'ad Moshe. Okay, that's it. Deuteronomy 4:44. The word sam, placed, is written with the letter sin, right? Like shin and sin. And it means placed, put. It is photonically similar to the word sam, written with the letter samech, meaning a drug, samim. This use of this word therefore alludes to the following. If one is deserving, the Torah becomes a potion of life for him, sam chaim. If one is not deserving, the Torah becomes a potion of death for him. And this idea is what Rava said. For one who is skillful in the study of Torah and immerses himself in it with love, here's that choice, then it is a potion of life. But for one who is not skillful in his studies, it is a potion of death. So what is the meaning of this? It's all about one's intention. Here we come back to intention. What is the intention behind everything that you do? This is all possible, by the way. We were never given anything that we could not do. If you truly take the Torah to heart, which we all should, and take it upon ourselves to live by what we learn, then indeed it will be an elixir for us. But if one learns Torah for the sake of knowledge and pride, or for the sake of upstaging others, it becomes a poison. And so the question must be asked, sure, I get how Torah study can benefit the individual, but how could it possibly harm the individual? And this is the lesson that our first and greatest rabbi has imparted to us, Moshe, right? Right here in the verse, Ya'arof kamatar likhi. My lesson will drip like rain, or rather, dew. Well, matar and anyway, tad. Okay. When the dew falls upon the earth, the morning dew, it equally nourishes both good and fruitful vegetation, as well as weeds and poisonous plants. See where I'm going with this? And so when a person is a God-fearing man or woman, and they learn Torah for the sake of keeping it, the Torah then gives them strength and wisdom. And as a result, the Torah which they keep now in turn keeps them. We had the saying in the army, Tishmor al ha'na'alayim shelcha vehem yishmeru alecha. If you take care of your shoes, and later on your shoes will take care of you. It's very true, because not then they crack and whatever. Painful. So, which is quite literally the opposite of one who learns for any other reason than this. Do we know how many learned people who are, shall we say, not nice people? You can tell. There's plenty of them. Scholars. Torah backwards and forwards. But where's the derech eretz, okay? What about professors of Torah? You know, those who have degrees and read it as nothing more than folklore, only to later come and preach to our people the true meaning of the words. I find that hilarious, although it's getting old. There are also those who love to throw out how many years I've been studying for this many years, which just goes to show exactly where they stand. And all this would have been already predicted, as we have mentioned so many times before, in the book of Daniel. Why is this? Because guess where we are, all right? They will be clarified and whitened, the words of this book, and many will be purified, and the wicked will pervert them, and all the wicked will not understand, but the wise will understand. Now remember these words, specific choice of words. In the end of days, everyone will have access, the whole world will have access, as it is today. You want Torah, you want any kind of Talmud in English or in any other language, you want Kabbalah, you got everything. Go ahead, have at it. It's all accessible to everyone. But those who get it act accordingly. And those who don't, Jew or Gentile alike, doesn't matter here. Those who don't, who have received the same amount of knowledge as the wise, they're not called foolish, but wicked. The opposite of wise is foolish, yet here we have wise and wicked. Because they have what's right, they have the truth, and yet they make a conscious decision to call good evil and evil good. And this is ultimately the difference between the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. There's your elixir. The Torah is the tree of life. Proverbs 3:18, it is a tree of life for those who grasp it, and those who draw near are fortunate. Etz chaim hi, lamachazikim ba v'tomcha meushar. You see, it's the same tree, and it's the beholder who determines the outcome. Same thing with the mitzvah. If a person does a mitzvah wholeheartedly, or if a person does a mitzvah out of resentment or contempt. Tree of life, tree of knowledge of good and evil, which led to what? Death. Okay. Right here, you see, the third verse of the song, we understand the hidden order of things and the proper way to open the channels. And that is through speech and action, heaven and earth, learning and doing. If you've been with us for a while now, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. Now, if you missed it, check out Parashat Ekev, Neil, and you should get it. And those who have know where I'm going. We hinted upon it earlier in this teaching so far. This is the same concept of the Shirah, elevating Malchut. All the goodness that we get, everything you see in the universe, where does it come from? It comes from above. Again, we are the lowest point. Nothing really comes here unless we are given it. Okay? So it's not like we're creating anything new, but rather restoring it. This is our job. It comes from above down here. Then we toil, comprehend, learn, live, and organize it and build with what we have been given. Verse 3, Ki Shem Adonai ekra, havu godel Elohenu. When I call out the name of the Lord, ascribe greatness to our God. Where did Moses call to God from? Where? Here. Right? downwards, upwards, from the bottom to the top, from Malchut all the way up to the Shemayim, from the earth to the heavens. He spoke from below upwards. He's showing us how it works. I called to God, okay? Yes, definitely take notes. So the Shekhinah descended from the heavens to the earth, unified with Moses, and then as a result, with what Moses had been given, he then says, ascribe greatness to our God. Meaning he rectifies Malchut and elevates it back to God. So again, what do we discuss? The blessings, right? This is a Parashat Ekev. Check it out. So again, listen, O heavens, and I will speak, and let the earth hear the words of my mouth. Here's your order. From up, down, the channel is now being established. My lesson will drip like rain. Here's the channels, the conduit. Lessons like rain. My words will flow like dew. This is where it's coming, from top to bottom. Let the truth and nourishment flow from Binah, understanding, through Zeir Anpin, the 6 Sefirot. As we discussed, Chokhmah, this is the beginning. This is the wisdom before everything was. Binah was then taken out of Chokhmah. Binah are all the words that you see. Vaikra el Moshe, when God called to Moses, all the letters that were spoken into existence. This is Binah. So Binah, also known as mother, father, mother, because everything in this world was created with a male and female counterpart. Then Binah, waters, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Zeir Anpin. Through this, it filters down, invoking all these down to Malchut. This is where we are. Chesed, wisdom. Gevurah, judgment. Tiferet, splendor. Netzach, eternal. Hod, glory. Yesod, foundation. Here's a foundation right here. All the way down to Malchut, kingdom. That's us. When I call out the name of the Lord, ascribe greatness to our God. I will then take what God has given, coming all the way down those channels, recognizing those channels, restoring those channels, while understanding the channels by which the Shefa, the abundance, flows. I have to understand where it's coming from in order for me to actually do anything positive with it. I was like, oh, it's here. What if you haven't done anything? That is the difference of saying a bracha with wholeheartedly understanding what you are saying and just saying it. I then bind them within this reality all together as I call on the name of the Lord, fully recognizing where it all came from. And the moment that happens, it's almost like I have no choice but to elevate it right back. Only this time, it's rectified. Since we have been given the task of Tikkun Olam, the rectification of the universe, by the Borei Olam, the creator of the universe. Verse 4. Hatzur tamim po'alo ki kol drachav mishpat. El emunah ve'ein avel tzadik ve'yashar hu. Amen. The deeds of the mighty rock are perfect, for all his ways are just, a faithful God. Without injustice, he is righteous and upright. Why specifically the tzul? It says hatzul tamim po'alo and not sela or even, which are incidentally translated the same as being a rock or a stone, depending on the translation that you're reading. So Hebrew. Remember, this is end of days prophecy. It said it right there. Moses said, I'm going to tell you, this is happening in the end of days. This is where we are. We're going to apply this. This is what elevates us to heaven, to these given secrets of the Torah that Moses brought to earth. He saw the way. He understood the way. He's trying to impart it for 40 years. Let's help him out. Read it again and tell me what you see. Where else do we see a connection between the tzul? Because that's a question. Why dafka, the tzul? Why specifically dafkas? Specifically, why specifically the tzul? Who is clearly God according to this verse? What's the connection between the tzul and the children of Israel? Let's look at Isaiah 51:1. Shimu elai, hearken to me here. Shimu, all just listen. Shimu elai, rodfei tzedek, מבקשי אדוני, הביטו אל צור חוצביכם ואל מקבת בור נוקרתם. Hearken to me, you pursuers of righteousness. Go on. I'm a pursuer of righteousness. You seekers of the Lord. Yep, that's me. Are you hearkening now? Are you Shim'u or are you Ha'azinu? Look at the rock whence you were hewn, and the hole of the pit whence you were dug. For this we need both accounts of creation to understand this, meaning Genesis 1 and 2. Meaning if God is the rock, so that must make us like what? The rock which we are hewn. We're mini rocks. We're maybe pebbles. I don't know. Look at the rock whence you were. We are made of the same material as the rock. It says it right here. But also don't go getting so high and mighty just yet, because just like we were hewed from the rock and at the hole of the pit whence you were dug. Okay? That puts things a little bit more in perspective. That we can maybe relate to. This invokes 2 out of the 4 worlds. This is going to get a little bit complicated, but only a little bit. I want to introduce a new element to the study. This invokes 2 out of the 4 worlds, and they are in order of descent. They all look like this. There's 4 of these, okay? First one, top one, Atzilut. This is the archetype, the highest level corresponding to fire, and the Yud of the 4-letter name of God. Then the next word, we have Bria, creation, the second level corresponding to water, and the first Hey of the 4-letter name of God. Then we have Yetzirah, formation, the 3rd level corresponding to air, and the Vav in the name. And then lastly we have Asiyah, manifest, the lowest level corresponding to earth, and the last Hey of the name. So, here we go. Here we clearly see creation, Bria. Where is Bria? Bria is the second one. Atzilut is beyond. It's the initial thought. Genesis 1:27, Vayivare. ויברא אלוהים את האדם בצלמו, בצלם אלוהים ברא אותו, זכר ונקבה ברא אותם. And God created Bria, creation. Man, in his image, in the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. And so this is the stuff of the rock in this case, the spiritual stuff. But it's still not relevant to what we can begin to comprehend. So we need to go to yet another lower level to begin the combination of the spirit within the flesh, or in this case, neshama, soul, with dust, or rather the hole, the pit, the most basic of the basic. So here we see the stuff already created, the lower world of formation, Yetzirah, Genesis 2:7. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground. Vayetzar Hashem Elohim et ha'adam afar min ha'adama, adam adama, vayipach ba'apo nishmat chaim ve'ayi ha'adam nefesh chaya. And he breathed into his nostrils the soul of life, and man became a living nefesh. What's nefesh? Nefesh, because it ain't neshama. And yet, we are still not in this world, but rather we are in the lowest world, which is the world of Asiyah, manifest, as in the world of action. We are called to action here. Yes, yes. Now, without getting into all these 4 realities, the existence or worlds, so to speak, just know that the 10 sefirot, which we are learning about, the chart that I showed you, they exist in all these 4. And again, we can barely relate to one. That's the lowest one on Olam Asiyah, which is this right here. So I don't want to confuse you more than this. This will help you understand. But still, this is the lowest of all of them. And again, which in each one of these sefirot, all of them exist. It gets very complicated. So we're doing first grade. We're doing kindergarten here. Okay. But it's because, here's the good part. It is because we are in the lowest world that we can actually make a bigger difference. This is the only place in all of existence that we can actually make an impact. That's it. This so long as we do our designated job. And this is so apparent from this word alone, tsu, which explains the connection. So I'm going to give you these words and you tell me. Vayitzer, God created man. He created. Tsor, he created. Vayitzer is vaz, and he created with the vav. Tsor, he created. Yetzirah, creation. This, where is it? That white book behind me, that's Sefer HaYetzirah, the book of creation from Abraham, okay? Tzura, shape, form. Tzayar, painter. Tzur, the rock. Then we get to Tsar, narrow. Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar me'od. Metzar, straits. Mitzrayim, Metzar. Min ha-Metzar karatiya. From the straits I called to Yah. Anani b'merchavya. And he answered me from a large expanse. And last but not least, Tzara. Danger, trouble. And so when we read Hatzur tamim po'alo, the deeds of the mighty rock are perfect. For all his ways are just, a faithful God without injustice. He is righteous and upright. Danger or not, trouble or not, straits or not, narrow or not, the ways of the rock are perfect. Now, how could Moses know this? Was he there at the formation of man? We're talking about Genesis. We're talking about pre-Adam. He very well could have been. In fact, Moses is likened to man himself and is literally twice the reincarnation of the Son of Man, meaning Abel and Seth. After Abel was killed by Cain, a piece of his soul needed to be rectified, and that's the piece that gazed upon the Shekhinah without permission, which is why he was allowed to be killed by Cain in the first place. And Moses, God said, God told Moses and Aaron, he says, okay, come have a conversation face to face with me. He rectified Abel's mistake over there. Now remember, God's ways are perfect. No innocents die for no reason. Abel was not innocent. Much has to do with the reincarnated souls that return to be rectified until perfection is achieved. Again, we're going to introduce slightly another element into this thing. Don't get too confused. But again, this is another topic. I had this whole other thing prepared, but we're not going to go there right now. It might be too much. Another time. The well it's endless. So the reason I brought this up is because Moses very well could have been referring to Adam and his sons in regards to verse 5, the next verse. Destruction is not his, it is his children's defect, you crooked and twisted generation. Shichat lo, him lo, no. Banav mumam, do ikeshu petaltal. This is not a good translation, though. We're not speaking of Israel here. Because Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did actually atone for Adam himself, becoming the chariot of God, the Merkava of Chesed, mercy, Gevurah, judgment, Anti-Tiferet, splendor. We discussed this also in a previous teaching, don't remember which one. Moses is actually speaking of God's creation of the first man, Adam. Adam was created as the highest and holiest being in all of the universe, second only to God himself, which is why it was all given to him, and the authority to name all life and govern and tend to creation. Here you go, this is all for you. Have at it. Just do this and don't do that. And when he sinned, he was judged. As the verse says, Ki kol drachav mishpat. For all his ways are just, because he is El Emunah. He is a faithful God. He's faithful to his word. You sinned. Here's what's coming. Meaning that as the generations continued, just as Adam was cursed with death, so too was the world. This is why it says, Shichat lo, Destruction is his, singular tense, and not lahem, to them, plural, meaning that the first man sinned against his heavenly Father, which is what brought sin into the world, because he transgressed a command of thou shalt not, or in Hebrew, lo, no, as in lo tirtzach, thou shalt not kill. Right? So we read shichat lo. What did he corrupt? With a mitzvah of lo, of thou shalt not, or better yet, and more accurately so, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. Ume'etz hadat tov ve'ra lo tochal. Destruction is his, a no. It is his children's defect, you crooked and twisted generation. Banav mumam. It is his children's defect. Who were Adam's children? Cain and Abel. Abel looked upon the Shekhinah, and Cain killed Abel. There's your defect. But now, here comes Israel. It's talking about a generation, right? As Moses spoke before he began this song, bringing that back as a reminder, Dol ikesh upetaltol. You crooked and twisted generation. Israel would be crooked, like he said they would, but know that Israel had been tasked with the rectification of the world, so the load we carry, it's no joke. Again, this is a warning, and by no means a rebuke, as the words that were spoken here, or rather sung, are in complete and utter love. That's it. Verse 6. Hala Adonai tigmelu zot am naval velo chacham, halo hu avicha, kanecha, hu asecha, ve'echonanecha. Is this how you repay the Lord, you disgraceful, unwise people? He is not your father, your master. He has made you and established you. Very, very fascinating and interesting over here. Is this how you will repay the Lord? He's asking them, warning us. And here's the hint as to the end. Just like he said in the beginning, because, look at the language used. You disgraceful, unwise people. They will be clarified and whitened, and many will be purified, and the wicked will pervert them, and all the wicked will not understand, but the wise will understand. He didn't call them foolish people. He didn't call them wicked people. He called them, would you do this, you disgraceful, unwise people? Pay attention. What's going on here? Moses just gave us such a hint that forget about the rest of the nations missing it. Honestly, even most Jews miss this too, okay? You disgraceful, unwise people. Am naval velo chacham. Naval, the word in modern day Hebrew translates to scoundrel. Okay, it also comes from nevelah. Nevelah is a carcass. People call each other nevelah, you carcass of a dead animal, right? But naval is scoundrel. Unkelus translates this as Amma dekabilu oraita. Amma, as in Ummah, as in people, a nation, dekabilu, lekabel, shekiblu, who received, oraita. Oraita, Torah, from Ol, illuminated, right? A people who received the Torah. This is what he says about this verse, about those lines. Am naval velo chacham. But could Moses, in a love song no less, be accusing the people to which he's about to die for as being scoundrels? Does this make sense? And for no other reason than receiving the Torah? Like we said, to the world, sure, yeah, of course. But to us, to the wise, who actually care to investigate, who actually did indeed receive said Torah, no way, Jose. And so the word naval most likely comes from the words Novolot chokhmah. This is, I'll translate it as the conduit of wisdom, okay, Novolot. It's brought from the Mishnah 3 times about Novolot. Now, this is not an exact translation because this word, in this particular context, is not used in modern day Hebrew. But I believe either conduit or gateway might be the closest option, again, for this context. In modern day Hebrew, novelet, navlu, it comes from the word to wither. Haperach naval, the flower, it withered, meaning, okay, it loses its essence and it visibly descends. Visibly descends. So what are the three things? Okay, the 3 novelot. There's novelet mita, which is the gateway of death. What is it? Shena, it is sleep, as we discussed before. Sleep is 1/60th of death. Novelet nevuah, the gateway of prophecy, is dreams. When we dream, we receive a little bit of prophecy, mostly lies and garbage, but a little bit of prophecy. In other words, it starts from there and it comes all the way down. And what you get are only droplets of what it originally was. Novelet ha'olam haba, the gateway of the world to come, is Shabbat. As we know, Shabbat is me'ein olam haba. There's a song. It is like the world to come. It is just a droplet of the world to come, which is why Shabbat, we get an extra spirit. And Rabbi Abin adds one more. He says, Novelet chokhmah shel mala, the gateway of the supernal or upper wisdom is the Torah. In other words, each one of these 3 things has a part that trickles down through it. Meaning, as they fell down or passed through, there are similarities, but it's not the original concept, if you will. You understand what I'm saying? And so just as we discussed in previous classes, that a small part of sleep is likened to death, and the same with dreams, that there are good and bad and true and false messages within them, it can be likened to prophecies. Shabbat mein olam haba. So too the Torah itself is of the supernal and uppermost wisdom in all the worlds, all of them. But we can only somewhat comprehend what we have here in the lowest part of Sfirot, which is Malchut, in the lowest iteration of all the worlds, which is Asiyah, manifestation. And so what Onkelos is actually saying regarding Am Naval, a nation of scoundrels, in the context of receiving the Torah, is that we are a nation who did receive the Torah, as we could only do so in this world, which is much lesser than from its original source. You see that? The Torah is 100% spiritual. That's it. The Torah is before this blueprint of the world, and yet we have it here in this physical, putrid existence, because it is only within this physical, lowly, earthly existence that we can actually do something with it, that we can elevate it. Hala Hashem, verse 6. Hala Hashem tigmeluhu zot am naval velo chacham. Is this how you repay the Lord, you disgraceful, unwise people? All right, so we already went through that. Halohu avicha. Is he not your father, your master? Has he not made you and established you? So while the rest of the nations will see this as in the simplest form, if you pay attention, or in this case here, what Moses is saying, it's actually a roadmap. You don't see the hints being dropped over here. From where we are all the way back to the source. So from the little that we get while we are here, we can sort of figure out the next level. And once we get to that next level, which is a tiny little step, then, only then, to the next. There are no skipping steps here. There are no cheat codes. Doesn't exist. And so on. Because he is our Father. He is our Father. And if he is our Father, that means that we are his children. He is our master. And so we are his servants. We have a task. We have a birthright. He made us exactly how we have been made. And he has and will establish you, us. Yechonenecha. He will. So if you are right where you need to be, in the right positioning, the channel then is open, but you have to be there. And on an even deeper level, as Rabbeinu Bachye said, if you open your mind's eye, he loves to say that, ein hasechel, just as Abraham did when he saw the three angels. He said they were men, but they were angels. You will see that the large hay in this verse corresponds to the small hay in Genesis 2:4. Specifically, Behibaram, Be'avraham. That's the first time we see Abraham. Ele toldot hashamayim va'aretz Behibaram, when he created small hay over there, invoking none other than the heavens and the earth. Listen to the verse. These are the generations of the heaven and the earth. Heavens and the earth, when they were created, Avraham, on the day that the Lord God made earth and heaven. Hear, O Israel, do you see the breadcrumbs? The small hay created the universe, and the large hay is our way back home. Do you understand that they have been aligned? Do you understand what your job is? And nothing is more apparent to this than the next verse, verse 7. Remember the days of old. Reflect upon the years of other generations. Ask your father, and he'll tell you, your elders, and they will inform you. Zechor yemot olam, binu shnot dor vador, she'al avicha ve'egadecha zekenecha ve'amru lach. What are the days of old? The days of old to us might mean very well the generation of the wilderness. But if he's currently speaking of the generation of the wilderness, then what does Moses mean by the days of old? And furthermore, he says, remember. How can you remember something that had long since been past, forgotten, or never experienced by you in the first place? Moses is speaking of creation itself. So was he there? Maybe not physically. Maybe he was physically reincarnated, but he understood because he went up there. If it even preceded Adam, whose soul shattered into the 600,000 pieces, well, it's precisely because Adam's soul shattered into 600,000 pieces, corresponding with the number of the males ages 20 to 50 at Mount Sinai, when the full rectification of creation was about to take place. It was about to be complete. But when Israel sinned with the Erev Rav, because of the Erev Rav, their 600,000 reincarnated souls shattered even more. And they currently reside in all of Israel today. So there's way more than 600,000, obviously. As we've learned, the soul is not limited to one space and time. Some of you may have a problem with this. One soul can be split and exist in different places simultaneously. Take soulmates, for example. What is a soulmate? People realize a soulmate. Okay, what is a soulmate? It's a real thing. One soul made up, or actually a fragment of a soul made up of male and female counterparts, aspects, just like God created them, male and female as one, split the male and female into male body, female body. And furthermore, the soul which we possess is fragments of past souls as well. That's why when Messiah is spoken of, most people don't even know that he possesses 4 souls in order for the proper alignment to take place, whereas 2 or 3 just will not cut it. So until an individual, Messiah, possesses the 4 correct souls, he's not Messiah. And so, how are we supposed to remember creation itself? It says, remember the days of old. Thanks. Sure. Oh yeah. I love to sit on the grassy knoll and reminisce, because when we follow the Torah, the path that ascends, we will ultimately not only remember because we actually were there, but know as in that, where all the souls came from, which was Adam. And then we will also know and where is this? Da'at. We will know. Knowledge. And then we will know and understand the verse. Vayetzer Adonai Elohim et ha'adam afar min ha'adama vayipach ba'apav nishmat chayim vayi ha'adam lenefesh chaya. And the Lord God formed man of the dust from the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the soul of life. That soul which shattered and shattered and shattered. And you possess that soul, and I possess pieces of that soul. Oh yeah, we're going back there. So, do we see now what's happening? We see where we are going. Do we see how we are going to get there? But then it says, ask your father and he will tell you, your elders and they will inform you. Was your daddy around for creation? Mine wasn't. But we've been given a command in the Torah, in the Shema no less, Veshinantam levanecha, you will impart these to your sons. No generation has been more connected to creation like the generation of the wilderness. And what I learned, my father taught me, and his father taught him, and his father taught him, going all the way back to the 600,000 souls of Israel who received the Torah on Mount Sinai. The 600,000 souls that together made up one soul, the first and only complete soul, that was Adam. Now, I sincerely apologize, but we don't have enough time to complete the whole song now. Wow, it's a while. It's been about, it's been about an hour and 20 minutes. Good for you if you're still there. We're only in verse 7, scratching the service. This could be easily a 10-hour class, like nothing. So with your permission and understanding, we're gonna just wrap things up, okay? Keep reading it, please. Really, you'll just read it. See what it does to you with the understanding that we've learned. Understand what it is that you are reading, and then just read it and get with it. Understand what it invokes. Write it down. So we'll hop to the end of the chapter. And Moses finished speaking all these words to all of Israel. And he said to them, set your hearts to all of the words which I bear witness. So don't listen to me, listen to him. To all of the words which I bear witness for you this day, so that you may command your children to observe, to do all the words of this Torah. Incidentally, I forgot to write this down, but I just remembered it. We discussed that everything in the Torah matters who said it, to where, what, when, how, right? This was the last hour of Moses' life. He was about to leave this world. He was about to die. This is his deathbed confession. And even in court, a deathbed confession, it holds water, it carries weight. And even more so, before a person dies, especially if they're great tzaddikim, the secrets that they have been keeping their entire life, because just because someone shares something doesn't mean that they don't know a whole lot more. It's like all you see is the tip of the iceberg, but you have no idea what else is out there that is not being shared with you, that individual just has to silently take with them and can only observe because they were never given permission. But a great tzaddik on their deathbed, usually mamash on their deathbed, is given permission to share supernal secrets. And this is what this song is. For it is not an empty thing for you. It is your life. And through this thing, you will lengthen your days upon the land to which you are crossing over the Jordan to possess it. Since the destruction of the first temple, the gates of prayer have been closed, as we know. Because the conduit between Malchut and Yesod, it's been severed. It's never been fully restored. We know this. When the first temple stood, there was just abundance pouring down straight from the heavens, right on the temple, right on Jerusalem, right on Israel, and then to the rest of the world. The rest of the world was good. When the temple was destroyed, it just all went to hell. We got to build that one up, huh? However, wait. The gates of tears have never been shut. And so when we cry, when we weep, God always listens. He always hears. Just as the heavens hear and the earth listens. This is the time, as the prophet Isaiah said, hearken to me, you pursuers of righteousness. You seekers of the Lord, look at the rock whence you were hewn, and at the hole of the pit whence you were dug. Understand where you came from, but understand what you're a part of. This is a time for us to rise from the debris that's continuously being poured on our head for the last 2,000 years, and dust off the ashes of our past years, of our past lives, of the 2,000 years of exile. Know that this is the time, because now is the time. Know before who you stand, but stand. Give thanks to the Lord, call out his name, make his deeds known among the peoples. Rise, sing to him, play music to him, speak of all his wonders. Don't be shy. Boast of all of his holy name. May the heart of those who seek the Lord rejoice. Doesn't matter what's going on outside. If you're with God, you're good. Search for the Lord and his might. Seek his presence constantly. Remember his wonders which he performed, his miracles and judgments of his mouth. Remember what he said, mishpatav, mishpat, judgment, now. The seed of Abraham, his servant, the children of Jacob, his chosen ones. He is the Lord our God. Throughout all the earth are his judgments. The Song of Moses is literally one for the ages. That's it. No one is expected to live up to that, but we are expected to follow his instruction, to wholeheartedly seek and understand where we are and know where we are going. Some men can shake the universe by calling attention to the heavens and the earth, and others, like this old man, can shake the universe by rising out of his wheelchair, calling upon the name of the Lord. May the heavens and the earth bear witness to the children of Israel and our desire to return. Make this time count. Have a Shabbat Shalom. May we all merit to be sealed in the book of life on Yom Kippur. I'll see you on the other side.